your movie is about one of the most controversial periods in American history, certainly in our lifetime, and you're not actually talking about the really still controversial issues.
Like I said, that's the one thing that resonated with me through this movie was the fact that they were addicted to social media and the internet.
The Pascal fatigue is real. I know everyone's talking about it, but I am kind of tired of looking at his face. Well, guys. We're talking about a movie that we meant to talk about as soon as it came out, and due to several life factors, we are now talking about it like 2 weeks late. But you know what? We're still talking about it. And the movie is Eddington, Ari Aster's fourth film. My first question is, have you guys seen the other three?
No, absolutely. Well, I don't know. What movies
I've seen
were
the
they?
other two.
Okay, so Hereditary, Midsommar.
That's what
Have you
I've
seen either of those, Kevin? We got to fix that. At least Hereditary, we got to get you on that one. And then the third one is Beau is Afraid, which I assume you have not seen that, Will?
I have not seen that. I'd like to see it.
It's different. Beau is Afraid is different. And so is this newest movie. At some point, I'll want to talk a little bit about my overall feelings of Ari Aster and his filmography and how it's sort of evolved. But first, open it up for general impressions.
All right. My general impressions of Eddington, is that what you're asking me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I went into it expecting a film that was critical of both sides of the political spectrum, or at least attempting to be critical of both sides of the political spectrum. I expected it to be almost entirely based in reasonable happenings, and I didn't expect to have to suspend my disbelief. I thought there would essentially be no action. I thought it was going to be very dialogue heavy, and it was not at all what I expected. Now, I was entertained by it. I think it went off the rails a little bit. I don't know if I would call it creative or a cop out, but we can get into that later. But I mean, overall impressions for me, I would say they were positive. I enjoyed my viewing of it.
It had some good spots in it. There were a couple parts where I was like, okay, that was kind of cool, but overall, in general, it was a bit lagging in story, and I was confused in some parts. You know how certain things circled around to being how they ended up being. So I'm sure we'll discuss that throughout the video, but overall, I wasn't a big fan of the film. It had some positive qualities, but overall, in general, as a whole, I was not very happy with it.
I would say I also came out like Will. I came out with a generally positive impression. I do think that there are big problems with the movie. I think, Kevin, you're right about the story side being a little bit lacking. In the sense that it goes off the rails. Like you said, Will, you have to suspend your disbelief, and it almost just feels like it lost me. That's all I have to say. But there, at the same time, I would say overall, it did surprise me in a good way. And part of that is that we've had a couple years of really bad movies, in my opinion. And what this movie gave me flashbacks to was Civil War, which came out 1 or 2 years ago. I can't remember if it was 23. Seems right. But the movie Civil War, in my opinion, just did nothing. It was set around a contentious topic of America turning on itself, but it changed the details so as to avoid offending anyone. It made itself not offensive to any one group, but by doing so, it made itself completely unrelatable, unbelievable. It was just like made up. It was just fairy tale. And in my opinion, Civil War says nothing at all. And I do think Eddington says things. I think there are messages to take away from Eddington. And I was really scared that that was not going to be the case. But I was surprised.
Uh, I don't really think that anything of substance was said by Eddington. I think that Ari Aster played it as safe as possible. The critiques he made were they're already generally accepted by almost everyone. The critiques of extreme conspiracy theory followers and surface level white people protesting without actually having a grasp of the concepts that they're trying to speak about. Um, like those were definitely touched on in the film and critiqued to an extent, but I thought that Ari Aster was actually going to make some controversial point that forced a mirror in front of certain groups of people that are not often forced to reflect on themselves. And I was expecting at least something that would hit hard, and none of it hit hard. It was all underhand softballs. Like, I don't know, like everybody knows that the insane conspiracy person who thinks that everyone's a pedophile is whack, and everybody knows that the 17-year-old white kid out in the street wanting to throw rocks through windows is whack. Like it, in my opinion, I was expecting a higher level of discourse as well because that's kind of basic also, and I just didn't get it. Now, I did take that seriously, but then in the latter half of the film, it made me not take it seriously anymore with the directions he chose to go in. And probably one of the worst things a film can do is have me take it seriously and then force me to not take it seriously. So again, I had positive impressions, but I don't think this film did anything special, and I definitely don't think it did anything important.
Maybe what you're looking for is for the movie to say something about a particular group of people or about a particular happenstance surrounding COVID. And my opinion, after having thought about it for a little bit, is that Eddington is not about COVID. It's set in COVID, but the purpose of the movie, the goal of the movie is not to make a point about the pandemic or about the different groups that existed within the pandemic. I think the point is a much more general one. I think Eddington is about what happens when people's lives get consumed by the internet. How living on devices and social media transforms what used to be normal life into this weird, twisted caricature of an existence, and how it causes people to become radical in varying ways and splinter from each other and start to identify more with online groups than they do with the people to the left and to the right of them. This movie really made me uncomfortable because I saw reality in it. I saw what is really happening in society in the way that these people's lives were so messed up. How do you guys feel about that?
I can actually agree with that. That was one of the things I did pick up from it was our country's obsession with, social media and the internet in general, and how people are finding their information and making life-changing decisions based on the information they find on the internet without doing any proper research. Um, you've got 17-year-old kids joining groups that they don't belong a part of, that they've never been ostracized or they've never been discriminated against, but yet they're fighting for these things. I mean, it's hard to fight for something and say this is wrong if you really don't know the extent of it. Yes, it's wrong, but how can you fight for something that did not personally affect you? Yes, it's an atrocity to see it happen, but some of the protesters were extreme in their methods, and basically they were going off information they saw somebody say in a video, a TikTok video, or something they read on YouTube or something like that, and that was I thought that hit very close to home.
Well, I certainly believe you should advocate for things and take accountability for things that do not personally affect you if you believe that they affect society negatively. So
I
I
agree with
think that
that.
that's
But the extremes that they took, the things they did based on the information that they got from the internet, I felt was a little extreme.
Alex, your point is not untrue. I completely agree with that too. I think that was the purpose of the film. I mean, he made it pretty obvious that the phones, every time something negative happened, the phones coming out, like that was very intentional. The phones were essentially like someone saying, "Oh, if I get you on my camera, you are in the wrong here," or "I have to film you." Like filming was almost like a form of assault in the film. So I think that what you're saying is correct. I just think that it was so watered down to where, like I was saying earlier, it just doesn't hit hard. Like it was such a the protest scenes were such like basic building blocks of what could have been a very I don't know, dynamic scene that involved a protest, but it was just like this basic, like 100 people on the street in this random town in the middle of nowhere saying like typical slogans. And I don't know. I just felt like it was watered down. That's the best way to put it.
I felt like it was cookie cutter. Like it just this is what people assume protests are, and they kind of made it. It escalated rather quickly, and the extremeness behind it, you know, all of a sudden there's all these people and they're defying cops and they're creating violence and stuff like that. It seemed like it was too extreme for the situation. I mean, there were more people in the protests than there were population in that city.
I said that same thing to Alex right after we watched the
Yeah.
film. I was like, how come when the protests happened, there was like 9 times the population of the
Yeah, their
town walking around?
population basically doubled and tripled just because of the protests. And I'm like, where are all these people coming from? It
I
didn't
think
seem
that they were
realistic to
invited.
me.
I think that there were online groups that specifically organized an event there. And they were even talking, the protesters at one point were saying, like, oh, there's not enough people here. There's not enough interaction with us. Like, they were just standing there on an empty street and they're like, we need to go to some city because that's where the real important protests are. We need to all go to this other city. So these were people that were like driving to different places to meet up with groups. Where I'll agree with you is that I think that protest, the big protest scene where everybody's yelling and it's just chaotic, whatever. I thought that scene wasn't super well done. It just didn't really feel real.
Yes.
Um, and there's a couple things that are similar. Like honestly, the homeless guy, I didn't believe that character super well. Like it just sort of seemed like a cartoon version of a homeless person. But I still just think like my broader feelings that I got from the film, I was unsettled by certain things. And so despite some of the technical problems I have with it and the divergence from real social commentary into the whole like unbelievable plot line, that's also an issue. Yeah, a lot of scenes I think have issues and certain things lost me, but despite that, the the themes that were being addressed resonated with me, and not in a way that I expected at all. And I already talked a little bit about it, but like one other thing that came to my mind was like there's sort of a taboo in film and in shows and whatever of like not showing smartphones very much, and especially not showing social media. Like showing an Instagram page, like someone scrolling on Instagram in a movie is a massive taboo. And I feel like it's sort of this self-hate that like everyone knows that we kind of hate the internet and social media and just how our lives are all on our phones now. And so there's this unspoken thing that's like in movies, just don't show that. Just pretend it doesn't exist. And Eddington, does the opposite. It's like, no, we're going to show people being on their phones all the time, going to bed and just doom scrolling on Facebook. And it's just unnerving. And so that was one thing that hit me.
I think that's the reality of our society, though. Like I said, that's the one thing that resonated with me through this movie was the fact that they were addicted to social media and the internet, and I think that's how it is for a lot of people, And you said it's taboo to show it on movies, probably because we don't want people to know our addictions. But I've seen it many times where I'll go out with a group of friends, and then literally everybody about me is on their phone scrolling at some point throughout the conversation. And it's the same way going on a date, one-on-one date. It's hard to go through the whole date without her picking up the phone and scrolling or checking the time or whatever. It's like people have become addicted to their phones, and the fact that information is so much easier to access now via smartphones. I'm not surprised that we're jumping off the rails at every crazy idea that comes through. It surprised me the way the mother and the mother-in-law, the way the wife and the mother-in-law were with their conspiracies and their theories about everything. Was like, where do you get this information, and how have you verified it? And it's like, it's just absolutely obnoxious information that they're going off of. And but it's fitting because when COVID first came out, there was so many conspiracies that I even had my own conspiracies too about it. I felt there was conspiracy inflating numbers of deaths and stuff, and so I can see. But I didn't get that information from the internet. It was something I developed on my own. But it's so easy when social media is involved because there's no regulations as to, you have to show the
Stop
truth.
smiling, Will, over there.
You have to be truthful in your social media posts. You could post anything and get away with it, and then you've got some sheep that comes along and says, "Oh yeah, I believe that. Let me make that my identity, and let me be an absolutely obnoxious person." And you're laughing because it's true, man. And I'm tired of seeing these people who have all these freaking ideas and feelings and thoughts on things, but because they read it on a Reddit page somewhere. You know what I mean? And that's what annoyed me about that. And it that's what it's sparked a little bit of, okay, this is gonna be something. But the movie became obnoxious. I stopped paying attention after a while. What are you
Yeah,
laughing, Will?
There's something you said just tickled me,
I'd like
man.
to know what did I say that made you laugh? Let's
When you
talk about
said
that.
when you said I believed in some conspiracies, but I didn't read them from the internet or anywhere. I came up with them on my own. That was just hilarious.
Well, when COVID was in its strongest, and they're like, "Yeah, we're at 400,000 deaths right now." I was like, "There's no way," even if it spreads as quickly. I mean, there was times where people got into car accidents and their cause of death was COVID. And there were actually reports on the news about that too. But you can't believe the news as much as you can the internet. Yeah, well, I mean, I know I was still married at the time when COVID was going on, so we had a neighbor whose father-in-law passed away, and their cause of death was considered COVID. But nobody took into account this guy had been sick for 6 years prior, you know, fighting cancer and all this stuff. I'm like, it's not COVID. It's just if I felt like it was just something to fudge the numbers, inflate the numbers to keep people scared. I didn't think it was as bad as it was. I personally never tested positive for COVID. I've been tested many, many times. My wife and the stepdaughters, they all tested positive multiple times. And I'm like, if it's as bad as you think it is, why am I not catching it? And I feel like
You have the best immunity of anybody in America.
probably I honestly have never really been sick in my life, but it was just like, and I knew these girls. These girls were sick all the time, anyways. I mean, they never washed their hands. They would rub their face and shit, and yeah, they're gonna get sick. That's what happens. But I felt like these numbers were exaggerated. And then watching this movie with all the conspiracy theories that the mother and the wife and the mother-in-law were having, it's like I could totally see people going crazy on this shit and creating these awkward not awkward, but absolutely obnoxious ideas as to what is the truth, with not really having any personal connection to what's going on and knowing that it's truth. You know?
Well, see,
And
this
Good.
actually gets into something that I had that I'm not going to say it's a problem with the movie, but it's kind of how we're talking right now about like specific instances of conspiracy, like were the deaths inflated? Were a ton of deaths mislabeled as COVID? Were people, was it actually getting transmitted like they were saying it was? Like, was it actually super contagious? All this stuff that people have all these issues with. The film did not actually really address anything like that with COVID itself. Of course, there were surface level things. It's unavoidable. There was like little, like almost throwaway lines about the vaccines and about the virus itself and about the creation of the virus, blah, blah, blah. But they were just throwaway lines. They didn't actually like talk about it. And like Alex was saying earlier, the film isn't really about the virus or
Mm-hmm.
even the time period where the virus was ravaging through the country. It was just set in that time. It's more about humans and their interactions and how social media influences the cultural zeitgeist. That's definitely what the film is about. But at the same time, I still do view it as sort of a cop out where your movie is about one of the most controversial periods in American history, certainly in our lifetimes for sure. And you're not actually talking about the really still controversial issues, the ones that are still controversial today, like the vaccines. I'm not saying he had to do that, but I was expecting that. And I
Yeah.
was sort of let down when he was just like, yeah, COVID's in our town. People are mad about racism. Okay, now let's have the cop guy go literally insane and murder everybody. Okay, come on. Like I was expecting something a little more hard hitting than that, and I don't hate the message of the film, but again, like it's just sort of watered down and bare bones, and I think it could have been done better. This is actually an issue that I have with the other Ari Aster films I've seen. They have like pretty strong beginnings, pretty strong middles, and then the endings kill them. So Midsommar, the ending is bad in my opinion, but not as bad. It fits enough to where I was like, okay. But the ending of Hereditary killed that film for me. I was actually pissed because Hereditary, up until like the final, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, was the best horror film I'd probably ever seen. And I'm a big horror guy. And the ending just like absolutely ruined it. Like the ending of Hereditary almost undid the film, in my opinion. So I know I just said a lot there, but what are you guys' thoughts on some of the things that I've said?
I think I disagree with you that the film would have been better if it had addressed more specific things with COVID. I think it was actually a wise decision to stay away from, for the most part, stay away from like actually really contentious, specific, factual claims that would make certain large population groups be like, oh, this is just, whatever. I actually really like the way that it played with COVID as a setting and used it to talk about society and psychology and these interesting things. As for comparing it to Ari Aster's previous films, I definitely agree with you that Ari Aster has a problem with ending films. I don't think Hereditary is not ruined for me because of its ending, but I do feel that it loses me. In the final scene, it goes so crazy to where it borders on the absurd. And then, not to get too bogged down in the details of Hereditary, but basically, Hereditary is a very, very dark, sincere movie about guilt, about despair, about hatred, and about family dynamics and all of these things. And then the ending to me just kind of makes it like a cheap, demonic horror movie. The second film Ari Aster made, Midsommar, I think that film has an incredibly strong beginning. It is also extremely dark. It is real. It's about tragedy and being broken, and it's about finding a broken person finding meaning in a really weird, messed up way, which happens in the real world all the time. And I love those themes. I also feel that the ending is just a little bit, I don't know, it just doesn't do it for me. Beau is Afraid.
Wait, don't spoil it. I haven't seen it.
Okay, I won't spoil it, but Beau is Afraid, I feel like it's way too long. The last, like, you could probably take 45 minutes out of that movie. I think it has a strong premise. I think it has interesting themes, but it goes off the rails and it goes way, way, way too long. And here's something interesting to me. Like, So the first movie Ari Aster made is basically completely dark the whole way through. The second one, Midsommar, arguably towards the end, it gets a little bit absurdist, where you start to be like, okay, this is just kind of
I
like
think
ridiculous.
a lot absurdist.
Okay, fair enough.
Like when they have the scene where there's like the breeding ritual and all the women in the town are like pushing that dude's hips into that woman. I was just like, dude, what is this? Like, this is dumb.
It gets hard to take it seriously at times. Beau is Afraid, you're not meant to take it seriously. It goes way off the rails. It is like a comedy. It's absurdist. It's ridiculous. But it still manages to make some points or to address some interesting themes. But I think it went way too far into the absurdist realm and like abstract towards the end. Eddington, I feel like Ari Aster's attempting to reel things back a little bit and say, like, I want to keep some of this like playful, absurd stuff, but I also want to keep the vibe of my film a little bit darker. But I just feel like he still needs to bring it back a little bit more towards his earlier films. So I don't know if you guys want to talk specifically about where the plot lost you and why.
I can talk about that if you'd like me to. I can speak generally when the plot began to lose me, and then we can get into more and more specifics. But the plot lost me when Joe went from like a tragic anti-hero who was somewhat relatable to just psychotic, insane murderer with no redeeming qualities. And that happened pretty drastically.
I missed what made that escalate. I mean, he was having a conversation with the guy saying, all right, 6 feet, I'm running against you because of whatever. And the next thing you know, he's in the desert sniping this guy. I'm like, how did that escalate so quickly? I missed something in the narrative.
Well, it just they created a main character who again was tragic, somewhat relatable. Like you wanted him to succeed in at least some aspects of his life. You wanted his relationship with his wife to improve. You wanted him to just continue to be that nice, cheery small town sheriff. You know, whether he's misguided or not, you wanted somewhat of good things to happen to him. And then halfway through the film, nope, insane, psychotic, child murdering, like, I don't even know, just disgusting human being, like lying about just self-serving, narcissistic psychopath. And at that point, I'm like, okay, you killed the character who I was following. How are you expecting me to take this seriously? And he wasn't killed in like a believable way. And when I say killed, I mean like the character killed for me. The character, like I couldn't support him because of all this absurd crap that began to happen. It just like halfway through the film, it just was not serious anymore. The first half of the film was actually very dialogue heavy and very tied to reality, I would say. I mean, there were some comical moments, but like everything could have realistically happened, and I would have been like, okay. But then around the second half of the film, you have like Sheriff Joe going to Ted's little party and then turning off the music. Ted turns it back on, then he turns it back off, and he turns it back on, then Ted slaps him. Like, so it started to get a little insane there, and then all the child murder and murder of Ted and like being a special ops agent fighting like Antifa. Yeah, I don't know. It lost me when he went from like a relatable character to a not even a person. That's the best way to put it.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. It was frustrating because he is a great character to begin with. I felt a lot of sorrow for it's Joe, right? Joe is the sheriff.
It better be Joe. I think it's Joe.
Let me look.
We gotta
have
check.
It written somewhere. Yeah, I mean he is a pitiful character, and I say that I don't mean to say that in a bad way, but like his life is so sad. He is living with a woman who has some deep trauma, and she is unwilling to open up to him and explain to him what's going on. He wants to have kids. She doesn't want to have kids. She won't even be intimate with him. And he has health problems. He's got asthma. He is... And to sort of top it off for the beginning of the movie, he is watching his wife's mother, who is an insane conspiracy theorist, turn his wife the same way. So like the one scene where he comes home and it's late, and you know at this point that the mom is crazy, just constantly finding the most off the rails conspiracy web pages. But he looks at his wife's computer and he sees like 15 tabs of just a bunch of like wild conspiracy stuff. The like that alienation that must make you feel to see someone that you love like falling into these spirals of just illogical insanity. I've seen what that does to people somewhat close to me in my life, and it's not pretty. And it's just, that to me was really real. All that to say, I liked this character of Joe despite his flaws. Well, actually, because of his flaws, he's real to me. He's like, he's got his issues, but he's trying, and his life is really sad, and you want to see it improve in some way, or if it's going to be a tragedy, let it be a tragedy. But instead of really maintaining some sort of connection to him, they turned him into a cold-blooded serial killer who has absolutely no moral sense whatsoever. He's a sociopath in the second half of the film, and I don't support that.
Kevin?
My biggest thing with the character, and I liked Joaquin's character in this movie, other than the fact that I felt like he was a pushover. He let people walk all over him, and he was in a position of authority, as the sheriff of the county, and I just felt like he wasn't made for the job. Like when that homeless guy beat him up and he just let the guy walk away, and just he walked out defeated. No police officer is going to do that, and I felt like he was just a totally just walked on and just done with and fed up with life. And then when he goes to the mayor's house and turns the music down, and the guy turns it back up and turns it down, turns it up, and then gets slapped and then walks away, I'm like, this guy is just weak. And then next thing I know, he's shooting the mayor from a distance with a sniper rifle. And I'm like, okay, that escalated quickly. And I don't know what about the character made him become that way. Maybe being with his wife, and then the conspiracies, and watching the wife degrade over time.
Well, his wife had left the house that same day, I think.
Yeah.
Like she,
I was confused by a lot of stuff in the plotline, like the mother being absolutely batshit crazy, and then when they're getting shot at, she gets shot. I thought she was dead, and then next thing I know, she's doing a speech for him as the mayor, completely like she's okay. Some of the plot lines just did not make sense to me, and.
I didn't like that ending. I didn't like them putting her in charge.
I liked the character up until he shot the mayor, and then it felt like it spiraled out of control after that. I love that his defiance against the state mandates, and how he refused to wear a mask, and how he stood up for himself about the whole situation. And then, like I said, I felt like he was just weak when he got walked on by the wife, when he got walked on by the homeless guy and the mayor, and then to be a completely different, absolutely batshit crazy guy on the second half of the movie that made no sense whatsoever. Why he was that way, I don't know. I got lost in it, and I have a lot to say. Like, how did he become mayor if he's absolutely, the guy got stabbed in the head, can't speak, can't walk, has to be helped. How is he mayor of a town? Because how is his batshit crazy mother-in-law, who was 20 minutes ago talking all this crazy conspiracy theory thing, in a nice suit, making a speech in front of people representing him, who's the mayor? How does that happen in reality? And it did not make any sense to me whatsoever.
That made sense to me. I don't like where they went with it, and I thought it was ridiculous that they entered some like weird relationship where it's like the mother's sleeping in the same bed as disabled Joaquin Phoenix with like the occupational therapist, and like the therapist is like pulling him naked onto the toilet and then slapping him and then going like, "I'm sorry." So that was weird. But if you're talking about how he got there, I mean, that at least somewhat made sense, because like he was stabbed in the head by Antifa. Brian killed the final Antifa guy, And he was like, I saved you, sheriff. And then he filmed the sheriff's body and was like, I saved you. So Joe was portrayed as the guy who saved his town from the evil organization of Antifa. So obviously, like, he got mass crowd funded by the entire nation and elected. So even though he's literally catatonic, like cannot speak, cannot take care of himself, he is elected because that's the power of populism. And obviously it's to a ridiculous extent because it's a film and Ari Aster's trying to make a point, but that at least made sense to me as a plot line. I was like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. The mother-in-law being his mouthpiece was a little weird, but I guess I mean it fits. Like I didn't hate that. I thought it was a weak ending, a weird ending for the sake of being weird. But if you're asking me, can I see how he got into that position actually being the mayor? Yeah, I understand the point that Ari Aster was trying to make there.
Like, literally in the theater, when the credits started the roll, I said out loud, accidentally, I said, what a weird ass movie. And then somebody from the other side of the theater said, I totally agree. That movie was.
Dude, people around us were saying the same stuff. Like, I don't think the
Yeah,
people around us liked it because they stood up and they were like, what was that?
yeah, I don't know if maybe there was a lot of information that was edited out of the movie, but I felt like there was some shit missing. You know, like
I think it's just
plot.
Ari Aster. Like if you guys watch, which I hope you do, watch Beau is Afraid.
I'm
That
going to.
movie, it goes from like, okay, this isn't real, but I understand what's going on and I understand the points that are being made, to by the end of the film, you're just like, what? And Ari Aster has even said, he's like, despite all of the theorizing about what the meanings of Beau is Afraid, no one has hit the nail on the head. He said, like, no one has really understood what I was trying to get across with that film, at least that he had seen on the internet. So
Then why put out a
keeping,
film like that if nobody's gonna get it?
hey, that's
I
a
mean, isn't
question.
the point of isn't I mean it? I mean, I understand making it for art. I love that you made it for art, but when you're in a big studio and you're making a movie, the object of the movie is to get people to watch it. And if you're gonna put in your voice and your fucking ideals and your beliefs into a movie and ostracize 95% of the population, what's the point of making the fucking movie? You know, I hate saying that because I don't want anybody to sell out and make a movie for the sake of making a movie, but movies like this, when you watch it, I feel like it was a waste of my time. Like, I really want that 2 hours back because I was throughout the whole movie, and I didn't go into this movie with any expectations. I figured it was going to be some political bullshit and I'm going to have nothing to say for this video. But watching the movie and the way it just escalated and then really just went off the rails, I'm like, this is a waste. This makes no sense to me. I don't. I really want my money back for this. I mean, I saw the whole movie, so they're not giving me my refund. But I felt like, what is Ari doing? And I haven't seen any of his other movies to compare this to, so maybe this is his style, and that's what he does. But I don't understand why the movie was made this way, to be confusing and knowing that 95% of the population is not going to get it. I don't get that.
Honestly,
I think
look,
most people can get something out of it. I think that it goes, some of the choices for the way that the film ends up being are very cryptic and very questionable, and I don't necessarily like all of them. I actually dislike a lot of the choices in terms of the way the movie resolves. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing to it. And I guess what I would say is, like, if you're willing to put aside for a second, like, okay, maybe the end of this movie goes off the rails. Maybe it's Ari Aster trying to be too weird because it's his thing. But what is still there? What is there in the first half of the film? Did it make me feel anything? And if it didn't, hey, that's unfortunate. Sorry that you feel like your time got wasted. But for me, I did feel like there was a lot there, and I did feel like I thought about it for days afterwards.
Well, I'd like to say, I mean, I thought the beginning of the movie was it got off to a good start, and I was like, seeing all the social media addiction, I was like, okay, so he's gonna have a message that makes sense. But then it was a complete 180 in the second half of the movie that, didn't pertain to anything that prior. It felt like almost like two separate movies, two different movies hacked into one.
Very much so. Um,
Yeah.
I
And
don't think that that's
again,
necessarily a
maybe it's
bad
my
thing.
ignorance of politics. I didn't really understand the whole politics behind it, and maybe that's what it is because I don't have a political
No,
stance on
this
anything
movie
really.
was
So,
actually really digestible to people who are not into politics, and I think like Alex was saying earlier, that's kind of the point. Like you don't actually have to be into politics to understand some of the dynamics in this film at all. You just have to have lived through 2020, which you did. And Kevin, you already said earlier you got the references to real life events out of this. Like you don't have to be very politically
hmm
minded to understand what they're trying to say in this film. And I
Yeah,
okay, look, wait, Alex, let me extend an olive branch to you. So I do actually think that the film, as something that Ari Aster wants to be palatable to, a somewhat large audience, it does suit the film better to not go super in depth on things. Okay, so the caveat is that I personally would have liked a couple of controversial things to be expanded upon more and with more realism. But I do have to admit, yeah, the film probably was better suited to just do the basic overview of generalities rather than like in depth on anything specific and still controversial to this day.
sure. Yeah, like you guys said, I mean, everyone went through it. Actually, everyone pretty much in the whole world was affected by the events of what this film is about, essentially. Um, like one sort of feeling that the film gave me that I remembered from real life was the weirdness of seeing all this stuff on your phone, thinking, having this mental disconnect of the internet and the real world. And when the real world, or when the stuff that's happening on the internet comes to the real world where you are, it's a very strange thing. And now I wasn't in a city where there were like really big BLM protests and rioting and stuff. I didn't experience that aspect of it. But in the sense of the first lockdowns, so Will, you'll remember in good old late February, early March of 2020. So this was my freshman year, I guess your sophomore year.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't see you. Okay,
Yeah, sorry, I was
gotcha.
nodding, but yeah.
Um, Gotcha. Yeah. So, okay, it's my freshman year of college, your sophomore. Um, I mean, we're just being early college kids trying to get the most out of this experience. And I barely had seen, up until the day that our school shut down, I had barely seen anything about COVID. I maybe saw a headline and I thought it was like basically like Ebola or something, just one of these foreign diseases that is never going to affect me in any way. And it wasn't until there was one specific day where, like, the first class of the day, everyone around me was talking about it. And they were like, oh man, did you see that this place closed? And they have cases in this state and this place closed? And I was just like, oh, okay, it's in the US now. And that's weird. But the thought didn't even cross my mind that it would affect me. In the second class of the day, even the professor brought it up and said, now I know everyone's talking about this. Right now, we're just going to keep going like everything's normal. And at this point, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. We're talking about this right now. And the third class of the day, it was like we knew something was going to happen because it was just this domino effect of everything shutting down. And sure enough, by the end of that day, or maybe it was the next day, it was like hours. We got a message, hey, pack up your stuff. You got to be out of the dorms in what, 2 days?
Yeah, it was like 2 days.
It was
And
like, all
it
right,
was like you will not be able to return to the dorms either, so take
yeah.
everything you need.
So in the course of like 24 hours, I went from completely blissful, like no idea what's going on, to like, oh my goodness, I have to pack everything. I have to move back to another city. I have to figure out my work situation because I was working in the city that I was going to school and I had to go back to my job in the other city. I mean, it was just this, like, it was so much at once. And the movie, I felt like it kind of hit that on the head with the riots, where he is watching all these videos of Antifa and BLM riots in these big cities and whatever, and it was just so shocking to him when he gets woken up and his fellow police are like, "Hey, the riots are here. They're in town," and it was just like, "What?" I thought that was pretty well done.
I related to the not being allowed in the grocery stores unless you have a mask on, and not want to wear the mask because you can't breathe or it's fucking hot or some shit like that. So I related to that. And I was on Joe's side with it, not conforming to what all the other sheep are doing. But in COVID, man, that was rough. It was so hard to work in that time. Like I went from being a chef at a restaurant to working at the deli counter at a Food Lion, just to be working through the whole thing. I didn't want to stay home and collect money like the rest of these people were. I think that itself ruined our economy. With all these people getting free money and not wanting to go back to work when this was all over. There was a time where the local Bojangles was hiring at $18 an hour just to get people to come to work. And people were saying, no, why would I come to work when I'm getting a free $700 a week for staying home and doing nothing? And that was one of the things that bothered me the most.
Was it really 700 a week?
It was like $700 a week for unemployment during COVID that all these people were getting.
Well, it was uncharted territory. I mean, to be fair.
No, I understand. I felt like, I understand getting unemployment for, having to be forced to stay home and whatnot. But I thought the amount was extreme. I mean, it got to a point. I was working a job in a restaurant, and I was doing construction, and when it first started coming in, it was like, if anybody in your family tests positive for COVID, like your actual family for COVID, you are forced to what was the wordly reason? Isolate. You have to isolate or whatever. So I mean, I was at work on a roof, building a roof, and I got a call from my wife at the time, and she's like, "Well, one of the girls just tested positive for COVID." And I had to explain to my boss, I was like, look, my wife, who I live with every day, called me and said that one of the kids who lives in the same house I do tested positive, and they're like, you have to go home for the week, and you don't get paid. And this was absolutely horrible from a guy who's worked all his life and has never taken days off to have to take days off because of a mandate. So I felt that in the movie. I was absolutely on track with it until it 180, and all the shit they made us do in COVID. But
whoa,
hypothetically, I don't have any intentions of anybody, but I don't know. This movie, man, it put a bad taste in my mouth.
Well, Ari Aster films generally aren't exactly feel-good films, but
and like I said, I haven't seen any of his other movies, so I have nothing to compare it to.
I wanted to briefly touch on some characters in the film that I felt like were kind of good characters. They just didn't get explored enough. So like Michael, I think it's Michael. Yeah.
Yes.
Michael's the black cop. And I felt like they really started to have him be an interesting character, but then he ended up kind of just being in the background and I don't know, he just didn't get used enough.
Prop.
I think
he got used as a prop like a literal prop in one of the scenes.
Yeah, I didn't understand what happened there either. He was like, I'm going to make you sheriff once I become mayor. I think you're great, you're amazing. And the next thing I know, he's planting evidence on the same guy. I'm like, why are you doing that? And then I felt like the character took a downfall from there as well. I liked Michael's character. It's probably one of my favorite characters in the show because there was an issue there with all these people protesting the treatment of black men from the cops, and him being a black man and a cop. It was an intriguing aspect of the narrative, but then when he framed him for the murder, his whole character, I mean, it's like they just developed this character to be a great character, and then you said, all right, let's shit on him now. So I didn't like what they did with Michael's character.
Yeah, and they said, I feel like maybe he intended to use him more and then just ended up not. Because, for instance, like him being a sharpshooter and like training all the time out in the desert, that was, kind of interesting. And then he actually never uses that. He just gets arrested and then gets tied up and then blown up. Like, he never actually uses those skills that he's developed.
Wait, actually, no. I'm pretty sure that the final scene in the film is meant to show that Michael is going to assassinate Joe. Like he was filming him at the speech, had his disfigured face locked onto Joe, and then in the final scene, he's shooting that target, and literally the camera is looking through the bullet hole. I think that was meant to insinuate that Michael is going to assassinate Joe.
That's very possible. I didn't pick up on that.
So
That could be.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the
I was
sharpshooting
just
stuff
surprised he
was
was
meant to
alive.
build up to that.
People
I was
who,
surprised
who
he was alive too.
Yeah, people ended up being alive from things they should not be alive. Like when he got stabbed in the head, I was like, all right, he's dead. Okay. And then he's back in a wheelchair, and I'm like, oh, come on. Just kill the guy off, And then they show Michael in the crowd, all scratched to hell alive. I'm like, how's this guy alive? He was literally right next to the bomb. And the other cop who was, 40, 50 feet away is the one that's dead. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah, I feel like they could have done more. I did the scene where the extreme leftist protesters are basically telling him like, "Hey, you're supposed to be on our side." I think that was a common experience, presumably for not all black people were in support of the BLM riots, and a lot of people were told that they should be just because of the color of their skin, and I think they could have done a little bit more with that. Another character is Vernon, who is the creepy, I guess, anti-pedophile conspiracy type guy. I liked his character. I liked the casting choice and the way that he acted. But honestly, the entire scene where he shows up and they have that awkward dinner exchange, that actually confused me so much. I could not understand the dynamics of
I'm sorry,
why
which
people
one
were
is Vernon? Is that the guy that
The cult leader.
Okay, that was one.
But it didn't explain what his cult was. Like, the only thing was he explained that he had been, he had survived a cult as a kid, and then Joe was weirdly hostile to this idea. He was laughing at him as he's saying that, and what are the chances that you would have escaped and no one else escaped? And then his wife is like, well, I was abused as a kid or something, and pedophiles are out there. And then his wife's mom is like, stop, you can't make this about you. And to me, that scene completely lost me. I didn't understand what was going on. Maybe, Will, maybe you picked up more on that. I don't know.
Are you talking about the scene where Joe is waiting out there with his food and thinks he's about to have a date with his wife? She shows up 2.5 hours late with the cult leader.
Yes.
I think that scene was only included so they could segue into the fact that Joe is now realizing that his wife behaves the way that she behaves because she was likely sexually abused or molested in some sense. So Joe picks up on that, and he believes that Ted, or at least he intentionally makes himself believe that Ted is the person who molested his wife because she somewhat admits to this during that awkward dinner. And then later that night in bed, which is the next scene, he's like, first of all, he almost says, did your dad molest you? And then he stops. And then he's like, did Ted molest you? Yeah, Ted molested you. And she's asleep and not even responding. And then the next day he does the live stream where he's like, yeah, Ted molested my wife. And it's just I think that's the only purpose that scene
don't
fills.
Feel like he was given that information that night. I felt like he already knew that because he had a hostility towards Ted to begin with.
Because they dated. Because he thought that they may have slept together or something. He didn't know anything about being molested.
Okay, because he did make a reference about him and his wife earlier in the movie. So I was under the impression that he had already, they had told him that, and he already knew that, and that it escalated after that meal where she mentioned something. So I did miss that part. I was always under the impression he already knew.
Look, I think that it's none of this stuff is definitive. For all we know, Ted did molest his wife. I mean, we don't know what happened to Ted's actual wife. We don't know what happened to the mother of Eric. I think his kid's name is Eric. There's a lot of things that are not explicitly stated. It's actually never explicitly stated either that Joe's wife's father, the old sheriff, molested her. That's never actually stated in the film. It's just somewhat alluded to. There's a lot of these plot points that are alluded to, and you don't actually know. So I'm not speaking definitively. For all I know, Ted did actually do something horrible to Joe's wife, but it's not actually stated. But it is meant to be interpreted that Joe is going around town definitively saying that this thing happened and it may not have happened, which is just adds to his psychopathy.
The last character that I wanted to bring up briefly was Brian, which is
You mean Kyle Rittenhouse?
yeah. Well, yeah, kind of an interesting little side character. Used for some comedic moments and whatnot, but I liked certain moments that he had and sort of aspects of what he represented. There's the scene where he is at that like secretive little gathering outside of high schoolers and whatnot, and he's trying to impress this girl who is a leftist. She has some sort of communist book, and he looks up what the book is. He's not a communist. He's not a leftist, but he just wants to impress her. And so he looks up what it is and goes up to her, and he's like, hey, I love that book that you have. And so this establishes, like, he is not a political person, or if he is, he's at least not a leftist. Starts to sort of just hang out with people who are, and he's trying to get to this girl. And through these just like social cues, he sort of turns himself into a leftist. Like even in that same scene at that party, there's a moment where a couple of them are talking about how like, this privilege that exists in society, this white privilege, whatever. And he says something like, well, not all white people have privilege though. Like, there are different ways to look at things like, class and whatnot. And they like totally shame him for that. They're like, they look at each other and do the whole like, like Nazi over here. Like, oh, yeesh. Like that was crazy.
I think he was going to have a valid point.
And you're supposed to feel that way. You're supposed to feel like what he said is not that crazy, but to certain circles, you're not allowed to say things like that. They will shame you for having any sort of nuanced, or if what you say is not extreme or fitting into their bubble, then you're shamed for it. And I have experienced that sort of social pressure of like, they won't outright say like, hey, what you just said was messed up, but they'll just sort of like subtly, I don't even know. I don't want to get too much into the details, but I thought that was well done. How did you feel about that, Will? Or Kevin?
Well, I was actually paying more attention to the dynamic of Brian trying to have some interactions with people of the opposite sex, and he was craving like that sort of human romantic connection, and through various factors of our modern society, he felt like he had to get super political to even have a chance with these people. He couldn't just walk up to them and be like, hey, we should like do something this weekend, or like go grab some lunch or whatever. He was like, oh no, I have to like research the book she's holding in her hand, and like I have to get like really politically active. I don't know, that scene to me spoke more to how like interactions between men and women and normal relationships are becoming fewer and far between, especially these days. And that is an issue that actually has not really solved itself since 2020. It probably was exacerbated by lockdowns and stuff from people being isolated. But that isolation in terms of like normal, healthy sexual relationships between men and women has actually continued to get worse. So I don't really think that was what Ari Aster was intending to be taken away from that scene fully, but that's what it made me think of, if you're asking my personal thoughts.
Sure. I mean, I feel like he intended, at least to some extent, to show the social awkwardness of the time, and how social media made in-person interactions weird. And there's a whole thing with like the love triangle stuff with that girl, I don't remember her name, that I wasn't super interested in. But yeah, Brian's transformation was maybe not super believable. Like the way that he goes so quickly to not just buying it himself, but to saying to his parents, who obviously he knows his parents are conservative, and saying like, well, it's not enough to be anti-racist. We have to expunge whiteness from our society. We have to destroy all of the systems that are inherently white in nature. And Like,
I
I
love the dad's response to that too.
can you tell us what he
No,
said?
you can't tell us
No,
what
I
he
can't
said.
say we can't keep it in the video.
Well, we all saw the movie.
Well,
We don't have to
The
if
say
you've
it.
seen
reaction was just
the movie, you
genuine.
know what he said. I
Yeah.
thought that was hilarious too, and it's supposed to be funny. But I didn't. I was like, that's not really believable to me that this specific person would be saying that to their parents in a matter of presumably like a couple weeks, maybe, like that radical of a shift, and then like saying it to his parents. But I guess that's also the point, is that people were like becoming radicalized, and I mean, it's just the nature of the internet. It radicalizes people, and it forces them
In
into
all
bubbles.
honesty, I think that moment in the movie is what spoke to me the most about the change, the difference in generations. You know, I'm probably the same age his father was, and I had the same thought. I was like, where are you going with this? Why are you throwing out these ridiculous ideas? And then the child, the younger guy, who's probably 5, 6 years younger than you guys, who became extremely radical and had all these obnoxious and really extreme responses to situations. I think that scene showed differences between the generations. Also, the way he acted for a woman doesn't surprise me. I've seen guys completely change their personality and their belief systems and all this stuff for a woman. I'm guilty of it myself, back in the day. So I could totally see that. Somebody, not knowing anything about politics and then all of a sudden being hardcore into it because trying to impress a woman. And this is one of the reasons I don't talk about religion or politics with people, because it gets, and Will made a statement about this too when it comes to dating. You can go on a date and be absolutely charming, absolutely amazing, but then, somebody says something, like she says something about her political beliefs, and if you don't agree with her, you're like the worst person in the world. And like, the people get into these ideas and it becomes their personality, it becomes their identity, and that makes for terrible people. And not everybody's going to agree with your political beliefs, but for you to ostracize them and tell them that they're not, or to treat them differently because they don't have the exact same beliefs as you, is one of the problems that we face today, with all these different generations having a voice. Whether you're leftist, rightist, or in the middle, it does not matter to me. I'm going to be your friend. If you're a cool guy, a cool person, you make me laugh, and you're honest, I'm going to like you. But for you to say that this guy is not worth my time because he's a Trump supporter or because he's far left or whatever and believes this kind of stuff, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Kevin,
I
I
know,
love
I
you.
know.
I love you more than life itself, right?
Yeah, I don't
I don't
blame you.
know.
I'm pretty awesome.
Look, maybe I'm a complete. I actually do think that political or otherwise like severe ideological differences are reasons to not date somebody and are reasons to sort of like cut a date
Under
short
extreme
immediately.
circumstances, yes. Like, I mean, if, for example, if I'm pro-life and somebody's pro-choice, and that's a big, you know, thing that bothers people, I could see something like that. But to sit there and be, I'm not sure what the word is for extreme political people, but to be that so narrow-minded and so tunnel vision focused on a certain aspect of something that you believe in, and then just tell everybody else, even though you're only 5% of the population that believes it, that 95% of the people are terrible people, or don't, even being hateful towards them because they don't agree with you. I don't see the reason behind that. I've always grown up in where people have opinions, they share their opinions, they discuss it like human beings, and maybe one of these days you convince me. But for you to come out and say, I'm a terrible person because I don't believe exactly what you believe right off the rip, is just, it's disheartening. And I think internet and all this social media affects that, and it's gotten worse because of it.
Yeah, and we could do a whole video or a whole video series
We
about
need to.
how the internet has you know, made groups more extreme, more isolated.
We need to have this conversation not in the context of Eddington because I actually liked where that this conversation was going. All right, you guys want to rate the movie?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Big Alex, since you loved it so much, go first.
Well, I will say I overall had a good impression of this film, and I think it's the best movie of the year that I've seen. But it's still not. It's not a masterpiece. I would probably give it a 6.5, which is around where I put Beau is Afraid as well. And for context, I think Hereditary is probably like a 7.5. So yeah, if I were to rate all the Ari Aster films, I'd say like 7.5 for Hereditary, 7 for Midsommar, and then 6.5 for both Beau is Afraid and Eddington. And that may change over time. But I feel it's worth watching. I will rewatch it at some point. It made me think. It made me feel emotions. So yeah.
I will rewatch it at some point. Generally, positive takeaways from the film, despite its flaws that I've stated. I will give it a 6 or 6.5. I do think it's the best film of the year. There's actually other films that I'd rather watch again, but that's just my personal preference. But objectively, yeah, I would say 6 or 6.5 for Eddington. Hereditary is probably a 7.5 or maybe 8.
I'm stuck on the fact that you guys both said this is the best film of the year.
Okay, what was better?
I mean, that's
Oh,
why I'm stuck on it because I can't really say because we have
he's gonna
completely
say
different
Superman.
tastes. I've seen that twice already, by the way.
Yeah, I know you're gonna. No, I know you think it was Superman. I'm not even joking.
No, I don't think it was Superman. Superman was subpar too, but like I said, I thought Superman was great for a Superman movie, but in general, it wasn't that good. I don't know. I can't say it was the best movie of the year, but at the same time, I can't come up with one that was better because they've all been, in my opinion, this year. You know, it had positive moments. I had hope for it when it first started. It came out. It got off to a good start. The interactions between Joaquin Joaquin's character and crap, I forget his name now. The mayor guy.
Ted.
Yeah, Ted.
Or are you talking about Pedro Pascal?
Pedro Pascal? Yeah.
Which
The
side note,
interactions.
really fast? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I
Go
will
ahead.
say the Pascal fatigue is real. I know everyone's talking about it, but I am kind of tired of looking at his face
He's
as
been
of
in
this year.
everything. Yeah, he's been in
He's in
everything this
everything.
year.
And I don't think he was the best casting choice for that role, to be honest. And I also feel that Joaquin Phoenix, he did fine, but I think that a lot of the casting choices were just fine in this film. But I'm sorry for interrupting. Continue your
No, no,
review.
no. That's a good valid point. I like both Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pascal. I do not think they were good choices for this movie. Albeit they are very talented. The interactions they had between each other at the beginning, how they were going to, back and forth at each other. I like those interactions. I thought that was good. I had hopes for this movie, but again, it changed so quickly. I can't say that this was the best movie of the year. I can't offer a suggestion for something else though. But my overall rating for this, I'm gonna have to give it a 5. That might change upon. I will watch this again because there were parts of it that I missed, and there were parts of it that made me angry that I was so confused as to what happened. That scene at the very end,
I can just imagine you sitting in the theater like, I'm so mad at Eddington.
I was chicken jockeying and ready to throw my popcorn at this shit
Alex
because it
said
was
chicken jockey to me at one point. Like when the film went off the rails, he looked at me and he was like, chicken jockey. Wait, yeah.
for real. It escalated quickly, then it de-escalated in a different direction, and just as quickly. And then the very last scene where it comes back that he's still alive, he's completely non-verbal, non-moving, a vegetable basically. And the mother-in-law, who's been a psychopath the entire movie, is dressed all to the nines, making a speech in front of people, acting like a normal person, confused the shit out of me. And then the nurse guy abusing him while sitting him on the toilet or bathing. I forget what he was doing, and then all three of them climb into bed together. I'm just like, what the is going on
Ari
with this
Aster
shit?
always includes male nudity in his films, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's definitely a pattern that has been established.
I had no problems with that because that's
Because you
for the
wanted to see it, it's
situation.
okay.
No, it had nothing to do
Well,
with
it's
that.
okay, dude. No, it's
But
okay. There's
it
nothing wrong
it
with
was
that.
fitting for the scene. I mean, he was
Yeah, because he was on the
um
toilet.
yeah, he's disabled and he's being helped by a nurse, and you gotta take them out of clothes because they're gonna piss on themselves. So that made sense
Wait,
for
why
the
wasn't he
movie. It's not like
holding
it was.
it? He should have been holding it to make sure it was
I
aiming
don't know.
properly.
I have no idea. Don't. I'm not gonna get into that. That's not what the point of it was.
I'm not going to
But
get into that.
it's just it got so weird so quick. I
No,
can't
Ari did that
really.
on purpose. We know he was trying to like spin people's heads around. That was definitely
Yeah,
intentional.
I can't process this movie as anything better than a five because it made absolutely no sense to me in the end.
You're just
Yeah,
a
yeah.
trash.
I want to throw a disclaimer for audience members that may have strong opinions about the COVID death count and whether or not it was inflated. I do not have the feeling that the COVID death count was inflated very much. Just wanted to put that out there. Kevin, I respect your viewpoint, and I think it was probably a fairly valid way to feel at the time. But I
At the
don't think
time,
that they
yeah.
were being inflated.
I don't believe that now. Obviously, I was pissed off because I had to isolate for a week because my stepdaughter got sick. So it was all kinds of bullshit going on. It was just amazing how quickly the death count went up, and I was like, "There's no way. There's no way." Back then it was everything was a conspiracy. So I got into that too, but it was probably close to being realistic. I felt maybe some of them may have been exaggerated. Like somebody just had pneumonia and they marked it as COVID. Because it was easier and it for insurance reasons they got paid either way. So I don't know. I don't think it was fluffed too much. Back then, though, I had all kinds of crazy ideas of what was happening.